Okay, everybody, welcome back to the Art of Business English, and this is episode 124. And I am joined again by Loic, my compatriot out in South Africa. How are you, Loic?
Andrew, I am well. I am well. Basically, we're coming out of a COVID-19 lockdown, and the economy is opening, and so yeah, it's
People are
looking
happy.
good.
Yeah, people can
People are
drink
happier
alcohol and buy cigarettes again in South Africa.
for now.
For
They
now,
are threatening to shut it down again, but for now we're okay.
that's crazy. Well, yeah, we're happy here too. Summer's coming, and we're coming out of lockdown too here in Spain. So, yeah, good times ahead of us. Let's hope things
Yes,
stay good and don't go back downhill. Anyway, let's
absolutely.
talk about what we've got in store for our audience today.
Yeah.
What's the topic today, Loic?
So we're looking at small talk. And small talk, if I could put it to you this way, is the kind of thing that happens. I think the dictionary definition is that it's not important kind of conversation and openers, basically little lines of pieces of communication that could be seen as useless depending on your culture. But they basically, they offer you a chance to establish a connection with the other person. It's basically a connection. So we call it small talk. And in terms of native English, it's almost, in most cultures, absolutely necessary. You cannot just jump into that conversation.
Yeah.
They'll put their resistance up, and literally you'll both feel very awkward. So it takes the awkwardness away.
And specifically today, we're going to be looking at small talk on the phone, or I guess you could even apply this to a Zoom call, or so not in-person communication. Like there is physical, like distance barrier now. So we'll be basically looking at small talk for the phone, and specifically with people you do know and people that you don't know. So we'll divide it into two sections. And yeah, the actual definition, I did actually take a look at the definition, because I thought putting it into words succinctly would be nice. It's actually like polite conversation. This is from the Cambridge Dictionary.
All right.
Polite conversation about things that are not important, often between people who are meeting for the first time. And I've also seen other definitions like pointless conversation, which pointless, or useless conversation, which I think is giving small talk a bad rap. Because,
agreed.
I mean, like you said, I think it's important in organizations, well, in social situations. And, what have you got but communications? Lots of friendships can be born out of just making small talk with someone. And maybe, small talk doesn't have to be boring and stupid. There are like many, many websites with very interesting ideas for asking people even some quite bizarre questions for small talk, but they can be a lot of fun. So yeah, that's what we're going to look at today. We're going to look at small talk on the phone or Zoom or whatever, and we're going to actually also look at just quickly review grammar for open and closed questions. So let's kick it off then with we know what small talk is. I'm sure most people engage in it. Why do you think it's important though, Loic? Like,
let me first say this, that it's equally important whether you are a native speaker or a non-native speaker. I think as a non-native speaker, it's probably important to learn some basic phrases, because it'll take the edge off. What we mean by the edge is sort of that sort of uncertainty when you're making the call. Give you a bit of confidence too.
Yeah.
And it's just important in terms of establishing that initial connection with the person.
And avoiding uncomfortable silence, which
absolutely,
on the phone especially. I mean, when you're in person, you've got the the non-verbal communication, so you can see, you react to people. On the phone, when that silence, and nowadays, even with like mobile communication, sometimes you're not sure if the person's just disappeared, like the connection's dropped or the call's dropped. You're like, hello, are you there? So silence on the phone can be a bit of a challenge. I always tell people, try and fill that silence. Like if you need to do something and you're not ready, like say, I'm just looking for that file now. Like fill the void. Don't just go, okay, 1 second, and then be quiet. So yeah, small talk at the beginning of conversation can help avoid uncomfortable silence, and it's a nice segue into the purpose of the call. Yeah. So,
Andrew, I think you made a very relevant point, if I can just cut in there for a moment.
Yeah,
and that is the possibilities of calls being dropped. And I've experienced it on Skype, I've experienced it on mobile phones, and I've experienced it even with mobile phones to landlines. Obviously, landline to landline, you don't have this possibility generally. But it's the weirdest feeling when you launch straight into a conversation and then you realize there's no one there.
You feel like an idiot. You've been talking for like a minute and then you're like, hello?
Exactly. So that pointless piece of conversation enables you to establish that there is someone there and the line is working and you can both hear each other and so on.
Yeah. And the person actually is not busy and can actually take your call, which can be frustrating.
Very
Some people
important.
answer the phone even when they're very busy, and then they're like, oh. So yeah, just that little like a little introduction as well. So let's look at the grammar aspects, and let's get the grammar out of the way. People don't like grammar.
Now, you're a technical expert on this subject, so I'm going to let you lead us there.
I have been, I've been. My wife actually teaches English as well, and she's what we call the grammar queen. So yeah, at our school we teach grammar really, like, we find it's important, the fundamentals. So yeah, I love my grammar. But yeah, open versus closed questions. So I'll give an example of a closed question. Loic, did you have a nice weekend?
I did.
Or, yes.
And that's it.
That's it. Yeah, I did. Or yes. Yes. So I'm just going to put this up here. So basically, closed questions are questions that can only be answered with a yes or a no, or in the case of Loic, he just repeated the subject and the auxiliary verb.
Exactly.
So yeah, they are formed with an auxiliary verb. So do, does, did, is, have, if you're using present perfect, things like that. So modal verbs, could I use the toilet? Yes, no. So some examples of closed questions are, did you have a nice weekend? Yes. Mm-hmm. No.
Yeah.
Did you hear that Brian has been promoted? Yes or no. Is this your first trip to Spain? Or have you been working here long? So you can see people can only really answer these questions with a yes or a no.
Yeah.
So what's the challenge with that then, Loic?
So here's the thing. It doesn't move the conversation forward. So whether you're the non-native speaker who's asking the question, which is actually very frequent, because you need to initiate the rapport, you know that you want to take the conversation forward, and you know that questions are very important. So you ask a question. The downside is you've just asked a direct question, a closed question, and as a result, you've got a yes or a no, or a technical answer like 5 o'clock, or yes, I've been working here for 5 months. And that's the end of it. So it's one question, one response, and now you've got an awkward silence.
Yeah.
That's your closed question. It's not that it doesn't have its place. It just generates one piece of information, and then you have to try again to move the conversation forward. So it's not as smooth.
No, it's not as smooth. And it will depend on the person you're talking to. Some people, even native people, are just terrible conversationalists. So you'll ask them questions, say, did you have a nice weekend? And they say, yes. And then they just don't even try, which can be very frustrating, even for a native speaker of English. I often try and socialize. And even in Spain, I socialize with people. I've even asked people what their job is, what they do. And I get like a response, I'm an engineer. And then the typical response to that would be, oh, and what do you do? But no, I get nothing. I just get, I'm an engineer, and then silence. So it does depend on the person. And socializing requires a lot of emotional intelligence. And it's a bit of a dance, in my opinion. It's a bit of a game. So people need to learn the dance. So that's the limitation with closed questions. And let's now compare them to open questions. So, Loic, what did you do on the weekend?
Exactly. So over this weekend, what I did is I went kite surfing, and that was great. It was on Saturday morning, and then after that, I think we hung out with the kids. Probably, yeah, we had ice cream after lunch. It was awesome. You should have been there.
Okay,
What did
great.
you do?
Yeah, what did I exactly? Thank you. Follow up question.
See?
Nice. Yeah, what did I do? Yeah, I had a wonderful weekend too, etc. So yeah, now the conversation is moving, and there's a bit of like, it's a bit more fluid than before. So open questions are also referred to as WH questions, and that's because they use interrogative pronouns like what, when, where, how, why, and as you can see, you can't say like, how did Brian get promoted? Yes. I mean, that doesn't work. You can't say yes or no, which is quite funny though, because we at our school sometimes we have kids who think they
100%.
Little kids who think they can speak English and like, oh, so what's your name? My name's John. Oh, very good. So, how was your weekend? Yes.
Fine.
They just don't know how to. They don't understand. So they just say yes. Like, are you good? Yes. How was your weekend? Yes. So it's quite funny. But moving along, so open questions are WH questions, and we use an interrogative pronoun to form them. The typical mistake I've found with learners is that they forget the auxiliary verb, which is typical here. People would say what you do on the weekend instead of what did you do. So that's something to be careful of when you arrive in Spain. So people often forget the auxiliary. So be careful with that. Remember, we always need an auxiliary verb, like when we're forming a question in English. So some examples of open questions are: what did you do on the weekend? How did Brian get promoted? When did you arrive in Spain? And how long have you been working here? Okay. Would you like to add anything about open questions, Loic?
I always like, and I've been very conscious of this question increasingly because of some of the work with my students, but why? What is your opinion about this? Why do you think he said that? Why is this important, do you think? That kind of question, which now gets the other person thinking about an actual because, and they've got to give you a proper response. So that's the only one I would add, really.
Yeah, why is super important. I completely agree with you, because especially if you're teaching people for like exams, like we do a lot of the time, students need to provide reasons to support their arguments. So it's always
correct.
Give the why and the reason behind it. So why is a really nice exploratory question. Maybe not always appropriate in some social situations. I mean, you don't want to interrogate people. That's another thing. Why did you do that? Why have you worked there for so long? Why did you get promoted? So, I mean, emotional intelligence when socializing is super important.
Yes.
Yeah, we're going to talk about I think we'll discuss it next week. We're going to look this will be a 3-part series. So this week looking at small talk on the phone, and next week we're going to look at small talk do's and don'ts in person, and in the last week, we've got some other things planned. I haven't finalized, but we'll pull it together. So let's look then at small talk, and now that we know the difference between closed questions, and people can see the power of open questions. So small talk on the phone with someone what advice would you give to people who are making calls to someone that they know? And when I say someone that you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be a friend. It could be a colleague, a supplier, potential customer that you have a relationship with. So it could be an acquaintance. What advice would you have for our listeners?
So again, and we're not here to teach people about emotional intelligence, but give it a minute, 30 seconds while you're dialing the number, just to think about who you're talking to, because you may know something about the person. And so the people on the other end may be busy. So they may be busy, which means if you launch yourself directly into the conversation, they may lose your initial question or your initial statement. So start off with a bit of small talk based on what you know about them. For example, hi, how are you? This is Loic. Okay, then they'll obviously respond. Hi, Loic.
Hello, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How's the family? Now, I know that you have a family, and I know that something had been going on, potentially. So I ask about the family. Maybe there was something going on, and you might then respond. But in the meantime, we've established a bit of a connection. And I'll probably, after that, I mean, it depends on who I'm talking to, but I'll probably then say, have you got 5 minutes?
Yeah.
And then you can tell me, I will later, or yes, sure, I do.
Yeah, can I
but just to break it up, to start it off, I mean, how's life treating you?
Yeah, I like that one. How's life treating you, John? So, I mean, I think, and as well, that's really important now, especially with people in confinement. I mean, this is just showing, it's showing people that you're actually, an authentic person. And I'm not saying you should make small talk to come across as a nice person. Like, you should genuinely care and show an interest in people that you know. It's polite, and as well, it's human to just ask someone how they're going. If you know that everyone's going through confinement or the quarantine, some people are struggling, some businesses are struggling, so it's the right thing to say, so I hope everything's okay with you, John. How's business? And John,
exactly.
Well, things are a bit tough lately. I say, yeah, I completely understand that. So again, you're trying to make that connection. You're listening for their responses, and you're not just launching into the purpose of the call and telling people what you want of them or what you need, which is very typical as well. Okay. So some examples of small talk on the phone with someone would be things like, how's things, John? So, Loic, how's these types of questions where because maybe if you're not a native person, you would think to yourself, what is how's things, John? I mean, what do we want? What is it that when we say how's life treating you? I mean, what do we expect as a native person from these types of questions?
Yeah, so it's kind of a question that triggers how have I been? Even though we're talking about my life now, you're not going to get. You shouldn't. Let's put it that way. You shouldn't get a deep answer. As a native person, I'm not expecting a deep answer about your life, but it's another way of phrasing how are you? Because how are you, unfortunately, it's been dragged through the mud over the years, overused, and so it's cliched. It's what we would call cliched. It sounds not authentic anymore. It sounds like you don't necessarily care about the person. That's why that 30 seconds before the call gives you an opportunity to think about it. If you know them, you can talk about their life, their family, their business, because you know them well enough, even to introduce a single sentence that establishes that connection.
Exactly. Yeah. So we don't expect the detailed response. We don't expect the person to go into. But then again, maybe they might. They could be having a very.
It depends on the situation.
They could say, "Well, to be honest, my life is really bad at the moment, and it's not good." But I mean, that would depend on the level of trust or the relationship you have with the person. But again, sometimes people really appreciate you just making the effort to see how they're going, checking in with the wife, the kids, the husband, the wife, whatever. And just asking. I mean, I always think it's polite to ask people, how was the weekend on a Monday? Or maybe a Tuesday. And if you haven't seen someone for a while, how's work been lately? Meaning, in the past few weeks. And it's also really important to get a feel for what's going on inside an organization. So if you're talking to people inside an organization, to different departments, asking them how's business and how are things going, it's like a barometer. You're going to get some idea of if things are going well or not well inside the company, which is also, going to help you get a picture of, not just that business, but for example, if you're a salesperson or you make lots of calls to lots of different companies, and for example, we're going through this, possibly bad recession now as a result of
Yeah.
the coronavirus, you're going to get a feeling for what the market's doing and what's happening inside companies just by touching base with people and asking how are things going. So
Yes.
small talk has a big role to play in, in being human, but it also helps you to get a feel of what's happening in a company or with people and their lives. Okay, so anything else you want to add there?
Well, I just want to point out to any non-native listeners that we have over there, I guess that there should be quite a few, that this is something I call a second level piece of small talk. So in other words, I would not launch into the conversation from the time that they lift that handset and they say, hi, good morning, or whatever the company's name is. I was going to say, Enron, hello, but that wouldn't be appropriate. And that takes me to something else. These are second level questions. And so it would be, hi, this is Loic. Oh, hi, Loic, this is John. And say, how have you been? Oh, good, thank you. Now, here comes the second level. And you want to stay away from the more controversial topic. And that's why, it triggers images of that when I say Enron. But for example, there's something going on at the moment with Black Lives Matter. And depending on who you're speaking to, you may want to stay away from that level. Or if there's a restructuring going on in the company, you want to be aware of that because you may very well be asking a very sensitive question, which is inappropriate. So you've got to spend 30 seconds before they answer and just think it through.
Yeah, so planning your call. And this is something with all my courses, with all my training, I think it's relevant to practically every single area. You need to put the time in to plan well. And if you plan who you're ringing and you think about who the target communicator is, the target, or we would say target audience, or the person that you're communicating with, if you have them in mind when developing your presentation or going to a meeting or making a call, it's going to make that call much more effective, or that presentation much more effective, or that meeting much more effective. So, yeah, I completely agree with you. Planning what you're going to say, thinking about what's going on is in that organization is really important at the time. So let's quickly just look at some expressions that you can make with someone, or some questions to make small talk with someone on the phone that you know. You can say things like, how's things, John? Or how's the family, Maria? How's life treating you, John? How was the weekend? What did you get up to on the weekend? So to get up to is a phrasal verb, and that means, what did you do? How's work been lately? And are you busy these days? Again, that's a closed question, but it can lead to an open question. You can say like, "Are you busy these days?" Yeah, really busy. Oh, that's great. We are really busy too, because you want. I'm always happy when my colleagues or people I work with are busy, because it means they're doing well. So how's business been as well? Meaning how is business going? That's a way to get an idea about how things are, what things are like in the organization. Okay, so is there anything else you'd like to add about small talk?
Just two things really. The one is this, just to point out that it starts off with very small questions and answers. So, hi, how are you? You get an answer, then you take it to the next level. And perhaps, are you busy these days, can actually be modified slightly. And you might say, what are you busy with these days?
Yeah, what are you busy
very
with?
Very similar questions, but now you're prompting them to give you a slightly longer answer. So it works like this. One question, one answer, one question, one answer. And now you're going for the third level where you can literally say, well, you're transitioning basically. For example, right, well, the reason I'm calling is that, and you launch into it.
Exactly.
So that's kind of your third level. From that third level, you now can proceed to your actual reason for the call.
Yeah, great, Loic. Yeah. So that's, that's the dance really. It's important to note that you don't get stuck on small talk unless the other person really takes it forward. But you don't, small talk is something that you do. And like a native person would expect it. It's not like abnormal for them. But you don't get stuck talking for 5 or 10 minutes about the person's life. Generally, it's polite, and then you need to transition because, typically a person will be expecting that transition. They won't be expecting you to like interrogate them and ask them 3 or 4 questions about their life or how they're going. Okay, well, why don't we just quickly try and model that for our
All
audience?
right.
Ring, 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 ring.
Hi, Loic speaking.
Loic, hi, it's Andrew.
Hey, Andrew, what's happening?
Not a lot, actually. I'm just busy working away. And how are you? How is everything going with you?
It's all right. We've been busy here. I mean, I've got that new contract I spoke to you about last week.
Great. So business is good then?
It's okay. Yeah, which is good.
Yeah, great. I'm glad to hear that. Now, I just was calling you to let you know ... and I made the transition. Yeah. So basically, like, that's a very simple way of doing small talk. And you can see it's not like taking me 5 minutes. It took us like a minute or barely that. So you could go into more detail if the person is up for it, or you could just do what we did, which was a 30-second intro and then transition. It's also important to note that stating the purpose of your call is really central, key to making a successful call with someone.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's transition then into making small talk with someone that you don't know on the phone, which is a bit different in my opinion. I'm going to argue that you don't really make small talk with people who you've never met before or you don't really have a relationship for on the phone. In person, yes, but on the phone, generally, I mean, Loic, why would you call someone who you've never met before on the phone?
Hey, probably because I need to do what we call a cold call. Now, it's not necessarily a sales call, but let's just say the person that we are talking to is cold. They're not expecting your call. They'll be surprised when they hear from you. They don't know who you are. They don't know your name. They don't know your company.
Yeah.
So it's the first time they hear from you.
Yeah, that's going to be a more difficult situation, especially for people who, don't speak English natively. So my recommendation is just to make statements, really, as opposed to start asking people questions. So, the reason for that is it's a bit weird to ask people about how their weekend has been.
Yeah.
If you don't really know them. Like, how was your weekend? I was like, yeah, it was fine, actually. So, it would be a bit awkward. That would be worse than silence.
It would be.
Yeah. So my argument is, when you get on the phone to someone, you need to make a sales call, or you need to contact someone about a service, or, maybe they're going to be a potential new supplier. There are many different reasons why you would call someone that you don't know. But it is still, polite to wish someone well, or say, for example, I hope you're well, or how's everything with you? And that one can be done quickly. Or this one's quite formal. I trust you are doing well. Again, we don't really expect a response to these. You can also say, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, which is important because then you're transmitting to the person that their time is valuable. You can say, I'm Andrew. Mark Burns gave me your number. He told me you're the person to talk to about. So just telling the person how you got their contact and trying to find a point of a link between the relationship, that can also help. And so, you are not too busy, are you? That's a tag question.
Yeah.
And remember, if we use a tag question, if the tag is positive, it will give you a negative response typically. So if I say, so you're not too busy, are you? So the tag is positive, are you? Then naturally a person will say, no, I'm not busy. So you can use tag questions to elicit the type of response you want. For example, if you want a positive response like, I'm not wasting your time, am I, is positive. Say, oh, no, you're not. But if I said, I'm wasting your time, aren't I? then the typical response would be positive. Yes, you are. So you need to tag questions are good. They're useful because you can try and not manipulate people, but a positive tag will get a negative response, and a negative tag will get a positive response. And finally, I just need 5 minutes of your time. Would that be okay? Again, that's a closed question. Would that be okay? So what advice would you have for listeners about making small talk on the phone with people that you don't know?
So at the risk of sounding very repetitive on my part, I really feel that it's important to reinforce two things. And the first one is that time is limited in this fast-paced age, so people will probably have very little time to give you. Secondly, bearing in mind who it is that you're talking to. Maybe you're calling a housewife who has children. Even in the case of the traditional housewife with children, she may have the children running around her right now. And so she doesn't have 5 minutes for you. And so I think two of the points that you raised, two opportunities. The first one, if you can, hi, I'm Andrew. Mark Burns gave me your number. He told me that you're the right person to speak to about whatever. That's a very good one because it establishes immediately a valid connection. Like you really are connected before you even start. That almost instantly, social proof. So it takes them from cold to a little bit warm, so they're a bit more receptive to you. And the second one is just establishing that they have time to talk to you. So would you have 5 minutes? This will just take a minute. Are you available? And that allows you to establish whether they'll actually listen to you in the first place. Because if you just go ahead and launch into it and say, for example, I hope you're well, chances are they'll say, yes, I am, thank you. If you're lucky, they may say, I am, and yourself, oh, I'm well too, thank you for asking, which is a very, we were just talking earlier, it's probably a very terrible thing to say because there are organizations around the world that use them. So you want to be aware of what should be said. So you ask that question, hi, I hope you're well. They probably will respond with something positive. Now you launch into it. They actually haven't told you if they're available to speak to you. You know, so 30 seconds later, they're wanting to cut you off. So to me, a bit of social proof and being mindful of their time are probably two of the most salient points.
Yeah. And if you just push on and don't wait for them to respond, or you don't consider their time, even though you think they're listening to you, maybe they're not as well.
Yeah, maybe they're not.
Oh God, this is annoying. So they just switch off, or they just wait for you to pause so they can say, sorry, I'm not interested. I'm not interested. I don't have time. So yeah, I mean, it's nice to be a bit sensitive towards people's time. It's difficult though if you are making sales calls to cold sales calls to people. But at the same time, maybe you're just contacting someone who is going to be a supplier. So like it's in their interest to be nice to you because you could become a new customer for them. So, you could do something like this, like, hi, ring, hi. And the company says, oh, this is company X. And you say, hello, my name is Andrew. I'm just calling about this product I was interested in. And the person says, oh, okay, which product was that? Yeah. And that is, you've missed out all the small talk. You've gone straight into what you're talking about.
Yes.
Or you could say, hello, my name's Andrew. Yeah. Oh, hello, Andrew. How can I help you? Just was wondering if I could get some help with this. How's everything? Are you okay? Have you got time to help me with that?
Yes.
But again, I mean, if someone's calling, if someone's going to be serving you, then it's in their interest to make small talk. But if you're going the other way, hello, this is Andrew calling from company X. How are you? I hope you're well. Oh, yes, I'm fine, thank you. Now, I was just hoping I could have 5 minutes of your time to discuss something, an opportunity, or a product or a service, or wondering if you had 5 minutes to answer 3 questions. But you're going to get a lot of resistance from this.
You usually do, yeah. Look, it's especially true with sales calls. But if you've established that they have the time for you, at the very least, you can now say, great, so acknowledge that they have the time for you, and now you can start to move towards where you need to go. So the reason I'm calling or why I'm calling, or
or even
I was asked to call you.
Yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. The reason I'm calling is, yeah. Okay, so that's a lot harder. Small talk with someone on that you don't know on the phone. So again, move forward. Not as much. You wouldn't spend as much time, or even really ask typical small talk questions with someone you don't know. Now, this in next week's episode, you're going to see it's going to be a little bit different when you're in person with someone. We'll look at some scenarios when maybe someone's coming to your company, you've got a visitor, you've never met them before, and in these situations, you are going to need to engage people in small talk and ask them questions and be polite and show a lot more emotional intelligence. So is there anything else you'd like to summarize or bring to the fore before we wrap things up?
In terms of the importance of open and closed questions, I think our listeners should do some reading up on that. If you Google that, you'll come out with the internet, open and closed questions, and give it some thought and apply those open and closed questions, being mindful of who you're speaking to. So again, the last 30 seconds before you call the person, just bear in mind who you're talking to if you have any information at all, and then cross-reference that against your open and closed questions. Because if you have 2 or 3, maybe a mix of those, now you've crafted yourself an entry into the conversation, a bit of small talk.
Right. And I guess have a bit of a mini script written up is also a good idea. Find some expressions that you could use. There'll be some on the. I'm going to put these up on our blog post, so you can grab a couple of those and just be aware of the different types of answers or typical responses that you get, because a lot of the time it's a dance.
It is a dance.
Yeah, and it's much easier with someone that you know. But I really encourage it, because some cultures are quite direct, and I think they forget this delicacy, that small talk. And I think it's really important for to build, because business is about relationships.
Yes.
If you can develop good relationships, long-term relationships with people, then you stand much more of a chance of being successful and getting things done. So it's important to show that you care about people and their lives by engaging them in a little bit of small talk at the beginning of an email. I even encourage even an email. So even and on a call on a Monday, or on a Friday, it's really easy to throw in some weekend questions. But these, just think about these. That they generally will start to come naturally to you.
Yes.
And be careful on the phone. You don't have the same visuals. You don't have the same body language, non-verbal communication.
True.
So sometimes it can be very awkward. So again, have a script, have a little bit of a think about what you're going to say, and that's how we do things. But not always easy. Not always easy.
No.
It
comes easier with practice, like anything.
Yeah, like anything, exactly, and a bit of confidence, which I've struggled with that as well, because I remember when I first moved to Spain, it was very difficult to make calls, especially to companies to sell services. You really struggled. And even now, sometimes in Spanish, I just get muddled, and this is after 12, 13 years. So it's just knowing the typical expressions and knowing the culture. For example, here in Spain, people are much more direct. They just go, boom, I want to speak to you about this, boom. And and that takes a little getting used to as well. Right then, Loic, thank you again for joining us. I guess we'll see everyone next week for another episode of the Art of Business English. And this time we're going to go into detail about how to maintain conversations with people in person. We'll look at, keeping this conversation going, how to avoid awkward silence, especially when you're waiting for other people to arrive. If you're in a meeting room, or you've got people, you're alone with people, and you're responsible for entertaining them or showing them around the company. You need to have an arsenal of small talk, and this is much more extensive option, because in person, especially when you're spending a lot of time with people, you're going to need much more experience and an arsenal of questions to ask people, as opposed to on the phone, where things move quite quickly because you're not going to spend, an hour on the phone talking to someone. Okay, buddy. Well, if anyone's interested as well, we've got a course here at the Art of Business English on. It's called How to Start a Conversation and Keep One Going. It's a short course, and you can get a 50% discount on this course using the coupon code. I believe it is. Let me check now. Yeah, it is Make Small Talk, I believe. Yeah, Make Small Talk. So if you can check it out. Click the link on the blog post, and you can enroll in this short course with a 50% discount. And it's got everything we've covered here on open and closed questions, and it goes into very extreme detail on how to open a conversation, how to keep the conversation going, and how to confidently bring a conversation to a close. So it's really useful for people who don't feel confident or comfortable in social situations and really feel awkward trying to start a conversation with people, and then not only that, keep it going and do it in a confident way. So yeah, check that out over at the Art of Business English on episode 124 blog. Loic, anything else before you go, buddy?
No, I think we've covered some interesting topics here. I think there is a lot of potential. Something so simple as that. There's a lot of potential. One could even extend it into email etiquette, and probably there could be material for that at some time in the future.
Yeah, definitely. I've got a lot of email etiquette for our audience, and I've actually got an advanced email writing course which goes into a lot of detail about making small talk over email, identifying who we're talking to, being polite. Yeah. A lot. So that's lots of stuff coming up in the future then. Well, thanks again, Loic, for joining us here at
Great.
English, and we'll see you all next week. Take care.
Thank you for having me. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.